Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day, and we help you make sense of what they mean and talk about what you might do about them. Joining me today is Dr. Amy Dufrane of HRCI. Amy is the CEO of Human Resources Certification Institute. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that group. And she's got 25 years of practice and research experience. She's published extensively, thought leadership on human capital trends, analysis and forecasting, diversity and inclusion, advocacy, certification, and I'm sure a lot of other things as well. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So, as we were just talking before the show, there's so much going on in the world of HR today. It's kind of hard to pin down a topic. But so we can focus a little bit, I was hoping we could talk today about talent retention in today's upside down world and what that means for recruiting as well. I'd like to talk about it from the employer's perspective, but also get your thoughts on what individuals might need to be doing to future-proof themselves. There's just a lot going on. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
That sounds like a great plan.
All right, let's get into the huddle. So job openings declined and layoffs surged in January. February had slower growth. There was a spike in jobless claims. Now we're in March and we just had several banks collapse. So, there's a lot going on. More organizations are announcing layoffs. How do you think the talent supply chain is being impacted by the current labor market environment? And what do you see as some of the big challenges for employers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think never before in our time have we seen the velocity of change that we're seeing happen right now. I think starting with ChatGBT and just in 90 days, we've seen some amazing things that are trending around people and how could this change the way that we work, to the bank collapses, as you mentioned, huge shifting there, to the number of jobs that we've got open and we don't have people to fill them. I take a step back from all of that and think about, and have been thinking about and doing some studying around this, is our lack in the United States of having a strategy around our human capital. And we're preparing our workers of tomorrow right now, kindergarten through 12, and then secondary school, really looking at, oh my gosh, we're preparing folks for jobs that are really changing at such a high rate. And so how do we get our arms around this? And how do employers and how does HR really think about this talent chain and the shortage that we've got? And I think we're seeing research that's been done around upskilling. Organizations are doing a lot of that right now. In 2021, there was some data that was released that there's $34 billion that organizations are spending in upskilling their talent because what they're getting isn't helping them to get where they need to go. I think we've seen in Ohio in the work that's happening around, building the little chips that go into all of the technologies that we have and how we're trying to onshore that, bring that back, but we don't have the talent that we need. So employers are having to upskill that talent and prepare them for the jobs that they need to fill right now. And so it's slowing down that growth. Even though we're seeing all these great technologies that are coming out, we've got this capacity need of talent and this gap that's happening with how do we fill it and what do we do? And, I think there are a lot of employers who are spending enormous amounts of money, as I mentioned, in this upskilling area. We were before this talking about, I'm on travel this week. This is my third trip in 7 days. And I happened to be at Deloitte University, and they have this amazing learning center that they have built for their employees to come together and their clients as well, to come together to share innovative ways to look at the problems of today and tomorrow. And they're expanding that center. They have a press release that they've done about it in December. It's called Project 120, and they're going to double Deloitte University. So they're going to be adding on more rooms for their team members and clients to come together. And they're building I would say it's more like a bigger campus than just what they had there. So the point of all this is that employers are throwing a lot of money at this. It's pretty amazing what employers are doing. And we are seeing just the need for HR folks and learning folks to really be working together hand in hand with the business so that you can make sure that your team is upskilled and ready for the strategy of the organization of tomorrow. And it's a big challenge. It's a really big challenge for HR leaders who have been dealing with how do we just get people to, how do we figure out, are we hybrid? Are we 100% remote? Does everybody need to be here? And, sort of the culture impacts that's having all from, what's happened over the past 3 years. So there's all this change that's happening all at once and happening so fast. This is one of the reasons why I love HR, because it's really at the nucleus of the organization and can really make a difference in the business of tomorrow.
Yeah, so true. I don't want to take us too far off track, but one of the things that we found in the survey, the HR system survey last year, in addition to the fact that HR is still not seen as strategic as they'd like to be, there was also a fair bit of institutional knowledge lost at the more senior levels. So organizations with the HR people with more than 10 years of experience just exited. And so there was a big loss there. I wonder how much of an impact that's having on some of these organizations' ability to move as fast as they need to move, because they've just sort of lost some of that, who we are, what we're about, and how we attract and retain people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of folks got really burned out over or just hit the age of which they're sort of like, our portfolios are back to where they were, when there was so much uncertainty in the market that now we really can either retire or, sort of reimagine what it is that we're going to do and contribute in a different way. So I think that's definitely impacting folks. And, coupled with the fact that you just look at the demographic trends of our workplace and you realize there weren't as many workers that have sort of the experience that some of the workers that are, exiting, had. And so how do we really focus and upskill that HR talent to help them to deal with the challenges of today? And, I think that some organizations have really embraced HR. We saw what great HR looks like during the past 3 years, that when folks were really faced with these challenging situations and how HR pivoted and had to quickly sort of, how do we help our talent to be as effective as they were when they were physically in the office? And then, then the chasm between the people I call, it's like the work from home and the people who had to be in the office, quote unquote, right, wherever that workplace was. And HR was right in the middle of all of that. And there's nothing strategic about that, right? I mean, there just isn't. You can't be, because you're dealing with a problem that is here and now. And no one saw this coming. No one saw and thought that, oh my, how dramatically this would impact the workforce. So I think that HR right now is having to spend a little bit more time on the foundational stuff, because as people are working remotely or hybridly in different states, you have to reimagine your business, not being just in the state in which you were operating. But if you're letting people work in other states, that places extra burden on the business, on the infrastructure of the business to, we got to make sure that we're set up in these states and that our policies and practices are right in these states. And again, nothing strategic about that. That's not exciting work, but you're protecting the business and you're protecting, making sure that you're following the best practices in these states, some of which you weren't set up to operate in to begin with. So you're becoming an expert in sort of how do we do business in multiple states instead of just the one that we may have been in before, we were in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I guess we're not really
building.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And that's, there's nothing strategic about that piece. But I think during the past 3 years, we've really seen HR really come to its own and demonstrate the value to the business and what it means and how you can be a partner in making sure that things are operating at the level that you want them to. So I think that that's been a little bit of a shift in, kind of where we were moving. I mean, there's certainly lots of HR folks who are extremely strategic and are continuing to operate that way. 18 months ago, I was at a Future of HR. Actually, it wasn't even it was a year ago. Gosh, time flies.
Time
right?
is compressed
Just
for me.
A year ago. Yeah. I'm like, wait, what? The time? I had the opportunity to join with 100 HR leaders from around the United States. And Mark Efron and Dave Ulrich sort of brought these folks together. And I had the opportunity to participate and heard the CHRO of AbbVie talk about the importance of HR. And what I heard from him was really an amazing shift of what we're seeing in HR. And he said in his organization, they were looking to make some organizational shifts within a certain area, within a certain department. And the business leader of that division said, I want to hire somebody from BCG or Deloitte or Bain, one of the big consulting firms to come in to help us to kind of reimagine our HR. And he said, we have an excellent HR team. The CHRO said this to this leader who was looking to go outside. And he said, why not hire us to do it? Why not give us a shot to help you reimagine that function of the business? And so they put the internal HR team at AbbVie put together a proposal alongside of other organizations that were from the outside that were looking to win this business. They all had to pitch it. They all had to go in just like a consultant to come in and really demonstrate to the business that they could shift and make a change and help them to make the best decisions for their sort of piece of the business. And this HR team at AbbVie won. They won the bid to support the function of within their organization to help them reimagine what that would look like. And this is a shift, right? And I've never heard a CHRO talk about now HR is really a function. It's, we are not only supporting the business, but we won out over some of these other big firms who were coming in and trying to make that change because we knew the business better than anyone. We have a strong team. We have fantastic consultants who can come in, fantastic HR folks who are part of our team who can help to shift the business. And that's where I think that's kind of, to me, the canary in the coal mine in a really positive way of how we're seeing HR really shift to support the business in a way that that's where we aspire to be. We don't aspire to, focus on the transactional components and be the policy police. And, we want to be that function that really supports the business and drives it forward. So I think it's just a really cool demonstration of an organization that's really been able to make that shift. Now I get it's pharmaceutical. They have a lot of money. A lot of businesses don't have that, right? So you have to flex within your organization and how do you best support it?
It's a great idea though. And, it does sort of they should be looking to their HR functions, right? And if they need help, they're the ones that probably should be bringing in a consultant to help guide them. But, I think that's a fantastic idea. And the fact that they considered it and actually won the bid is very interesting. I might have to see if they're interested in talking about that on the show.
Oh, it'd be a fantastic discussion with one of their team members.
Yeah, love to hear more about it. So, as you said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of upskilling. Organizations are moving at a very fast pace just to keep up. What impact do you see this having on existing workers and kind of the corporate culture? Right.
Well, I am a huge advocate for learning. Anybody who knows me knows that, I'm a learning junkie myself, and I invest in my team. I want them to be curious and discover what I call their zone of genius, sort of what makes them, what excites them about their job and what makes them happy. And, what does that look like? That's the zone of genius. It's not my term. There's a book that's all about sort of finding your zone of genius and how do you do that? And how do you discover jobs which you can lend your zone of genius to? And obviously there are parts of all of our jobs that are not the most exciting things, and that's not in our zone of genius. But how do you as a worker identify, as an employee, find out what your zone of genius is? And how do you as a manager or a leader encourage people, to find their zone of genius and to give them opportunities so that they can function in their zone of genius? And that, I think, creates that win-win for both sides, right? And that's all about discovering and learning and how, giving people opportunities to say, yeah, that wasn't my favorite thing. I was good at it, not my favorite thing, but giving people that opportunity to discover that. And I think everyone has the opportunity to do that, irregardless of what your job function is. You sort of need to be curious about what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, so that you can say to your boss or your leaders, hey, I really enjoyed that. Can you give me more of those things that are part of what really excites me about my job and what it is that we're doing as an organization? And I think that's something that is easy to do. That doesn't require a lot of investment from an employer perspective. So irregardless of if you don't have a huge training budget or you have a lot of training budget, you might have more opportunity to give people those challenges that are more fun about what they might be interested in doing or not doing. Anyway, so I think that's one super easy way, is to give people that opportunity to explore within their own jobs what they really like and what they don't like. And being curious as a manager, how do you make sure that you're giving people those things that really are part of their zone of genius? So I think that there's one piece there. Of course, being the CEO for an organization that's all about learning, I'm a big advocate for certification. I think that's a way to demonstrate your commitment to whatever profession it is that you're in. I think that certification in a program that is kind of high stakes and accredited, it forces you, quote unquote, to continue to do that learning on a regular basis, because being certified every 3 years, you have to get recertified, right? So you have to have a certain number of credits, and accountants do this, attorneys do this, HR folks do it, financial people do it. There's there's a lot of different professions. Doctors do it, nurses have it. And so it continues you and it forces you to kind of get out there and learn more. And how do you find out what's going on in your field? You wouldn't want a doctor who had knowledge that was from 30 years ago and didn't continue to stay on the trends as what is going on in the medical field, diagnosing your issues, nor would you want that from any other profession. So I think this is a really good way to invest in yourself. Organizations sometimes have funds and resources so that people can use those funds to recertify, but I think it's a great way to demonstrate that you're curious, you want to keep learning, and that you're keenly aware of that the world is changing and you need to be fresh. You've got to keep yourself fresh.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important from an individual perspective. From an organizational perspective, I think it demonstrates the value. And at HRCI, we've done research, at least for HR folks that get certified. We know they make more money, they're happier in their jobs, and they're promoted more. And then on the other side, we've done research from looking at organizations that invest in getting their HR staff certified. They have better stock performance, better ratings on Glassdoor, and their teams are much more productive in what it is that they're driving towards in the way of strategy. So we've been able to demonstrate this through research. And I think that's a good marker of what that means, not just for HR people, but other, you can kind of take that and say, gosh, somebody that's certified in another profession, they would really help me to drive my business forward as being a CEO or a business leader. And from an individual perspective, I think it really does, we have the data that proves you are better, you make more money, and your supervisor is saying, thumbs up, keep going. You're right in the zone of what it is that you should be doing. So I think that is, to me, those are really good things that organizations can do. There's some cost, of course, but I think as the world of work is changing, where we physically are working. I mean, right now I'm in a hotel room and, working away when I'm not at meetings and things like that. I think everybody is working sort of wherever you are, whenever you can. And so We've got to flex and change with the world that we work in.
Yeah. I also think that's impacted this whole dynamic around the curiousness, right? And giving people an opportunity to do things they hadn't done before, or an opportunity to volunteer to do things, get outside their comfort zone. And that really has impacted, I think, organizational culture, because people have had opportunities that they may not have had before. During the lockdown, people were asked to do completely different jobs. We don't need you to do that right now. We need you to do this. And, it really, I think, not only helps the organization because it gives people a much better idea of what the organization is about and what they do and how they make their money, right? Instead of sitting in your cubicle and just, doing your task every day. But, it also helps the bottom line and helps people move and helps that, movement throughout the organization. Managers can identify where people have strengths and much easier, right? You see the things that people gravitate to. So I think, that's a real positive, and organizations that have done that or allowed that to happen, I think have seen probably more success than organizations who, sort of force this is what you do and you don't get outside of your lane.
Right. I think that you're right. I think that giving people that ability to look more broadly, I think is beautiful.
Yeah. So how important, you've written a bit about potential. And I'm curious just to talk a minute maybe about how important you think potential is in the hiring process, and sort of how we suss that out, right? So how we identify that potential and how important that is to bringing people into the organization that maybe don't have the exact experience you're looking for, but you can identify the fact that they could do this job and probably much more.
I think that it is that those sort of competencies that are not the tangible, tell me about a time when sort of experiential things, but it's digging deeper into potential employees' backgrounds to look for those less tangible things, that curiosity, that agility. And, I think that working in organizations that have allowed more freedom to explore, I think is helpful. And then not just organizations that allow that, but then people take advantage of that, right? Like they're curious and they want to learn more and they want to do that. And I think one of the things that I have done with my team is that, always encouraging them to take on opportunities that are sort of outside of the walls of our organization. So volunteer opportunities, incubator projects, working with and exploring other organizations, because that's where, you see, you can apply that learning or that application of what you're seeing within the walls of your organization. But I think it gives people that ability to learn and be curious and look at that. Assessments are a really good way to look at that. Not the pre-employment sort of, but how does this person work and what do they look like? And it from the work world, like what is the composition of what makes them up from their background? How can that help to move organizations forward? I think that that's the piece where assessments can really help, and to see how will this person fit into the team and what would they bring? How do they work? So I think, again, it's looking at those assessments and figuring out the piece as to where they fit in to your culture, and understanding as an organization, what is it that you are driving towards? Are you, what are you trying? Are you trying to change? Are you going through some big movements within your organization and you need people that are agile and entrepreneurial, or are you keeping steady state? So you need people who are more sort of keeping things on the rails because you have some folks that are already sort of out there and making things change and grow and be more agile. Anyway, I think there's a number of ways that you can look at this. And, I think it's having a diversity of folks within your organization is key, from neurodiversity to, ethnic diversity to gender diversity to age diversity. All those are important because they're bringing their backgrounds and their experiences into the organization and helping it to grow and change. Because we're such a diverse country that I think your organization should be really reflective of what that looks like.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of ideas out there. It's not always this choice or that choice, right?
That's right.
There's always other choices that, we don't necessarily think about given our own personal experiences. And so it's always interesting to me to be in a group of people that have a lot of different backgrounds that come up with ideas that are completely novel, something that I certainly hadn't thought of, right? I thought it was a choice of this or that. There's two choices. We either do it or we don't do it.
Right.
So those are always fun conversations. So there's a lot organizations can be doing. I think your focus on the whole upskilling is very relevant. I think organizations are they have to, right? The world of work is changing, and it might be a little slower than we think, but actually it happens fast. You just sort of one day you wake up and you realize things are very, very different. And, I think we're seeing that in some of the changes in the tech industry already with just, the way that they're approaching their businesses. And I don't know how many people have been cut in total, but there's been a lot of job loss there. Not to say those people won't be looking for other work. And quite frankly, there's a big pool out there, but if you're not focused on upskilling, you might not have the requisite skills to, get these jobs that people are recruiting for. So I think that's also an important fact of, take some ownership on yourself, actually figure out what else can I do with what I know. I have a niece that's a nurse and, she's sort of, I'm in nursing. But her capability is so far beyond that in terms of the things that she could be getting involved in or, working on, or areas she could be working in, given her background. And a lot of people just don't, they don't think that way until they're sort of forced to. So you start doing that sooner rather than later, right?
That's right. That's right. It's interesting that you bring up the story on nursing. I was reading about a individual who during the pandemic, 2 small children, they were, really talking about sort of how the pandemic impacted women significantly. And this particular story was about a woman who's a nurse whose husband travels all the time and 2 small children. And she went to apply for a job at a hospital system. And they said, well, it's a 16-hour day. And she was like, I can't do that. Like, I have 2 small kids. My husband's on the road. I can't, I gotta find something differently. And she found a job that she is, working on the phone, doing nurse consulting on the phone or face-to-face, on a Zoom call or whatever sort of technology they're using. So, really, it forced her to think differently and like, and she said, I'm much happier when I'm working. Like, I don't want to not work. I want to do something. I want to contribute. And so how do I do that? So anyway, I think you're exactly right. Like, people, you think you become something, a nurse, an HR person, a finance person, and then you've got this frame that you think that's the way you need to work. And it really isn't that way. You can think super differently because there are just so many different ways that we're working, and you can apply these different jobs in different ways. It's very cool.
Yeah, I love that. And sounds like I'm going to go read this Zone of Genius book that actually might be helpful for people. So they might want to think about picking that up. We are actually starting a group on LinkedIn called Raising the Bar on HR. So just a little selfless plug there.
Oh, nice.
If people are listening to this and want to join that group, those are some of the things we'll be focused on is how do we, help HR get to the next level. And to your point at the beginning of this conversation, be the consultant to their organization, right? Rather than just doing the standard compliance stuff. We really want to get to the point where we are helping drive the business through people. And that's a big part of what that group's about. Well, thank you, Amy, for joining today. It's a great conversation. Where can people find out more information about you?
So a couple of different ways. First is you can come to HRCI's website at hrci.org. I also am the founder for HRSI, which is the Human Resource Standards Institute. We're certifying organizations against the ISO standards. We have standards that we're certifying organizations against in D&I and human capital reporting. So you can find out more about that on hrsi.org. Twitter, I'm on Amy Dufrane. Also on LinkedIn, Amy Dufrane. And if you want to know more about your zone of genius, you can read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, who is a founder of sort of this concept of the zone of genius. So it's a really fun, cool book that will really provoke you to look for where your zone of genius is.
That's awesome. I love it. I love that name. Well, thank you again. I want to thank our production team and our marketing team who are going to put this all together and get it out for us next week. That is it for this episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. And if you get a chance, leave us a review. We'd love to know what you think. You can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on our website. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks. Have a great day.